How many editing techniques can we learn from a Matthew McConaughey commercial? I've been a pro editor for over 20 years, and today I'd like to invite you into my edit suite so we can take a look at a commercial starring Matthew McConaughey that I completed last year. Over my career, I've landed on 5 editing criteria that I use for every project: emotion, story, rhythm, sound, and action. So we're going to take a look at the commercial from those 5 perspectives. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share the most important thing I learned from working with Matthew. First, let's take a look at the spot.
On June 25th, 2022, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was signed into law following the Robb Elementary School tragedy in my hometown of Uvalde, Texas. Now, part of this bill sets aside billions of dollars to make American schools safer. That's money to pay for mental health resources and security for safer schools to ensure that our kids can learn in peace and without fear. The problem is, not enough school districts that need these grants know how to apply for them. And for those that do, it is a complex and expensive process. But now, we have a solution. The Green Lights Grant Initiative. It will, 1, get the word out that this money is there for schools that want and need it. 2, it will help school administrators apply for these grants by letting them know when the deadlines are, what the grants pay for, and how to apply. We're even going to provide professional grant writing services, all at no cost to schools. That's right. It's free. When Camilla and I went to Uvalde, the parents and the family members of the children that were killed asked for one thing: make their lives matter. Well, let's make sure that the first bill passed in 28 years to help protect all of our children in schools matters. Learn how your district can get help applying for school safety grants at greenlightsgrantinitiative.org.
First, let's talk emotion. In particular, what do you want the audience to feel? Emotion is not an editing technique, but rather it's the foundation on which you should make all of your other editing decisions. If you play a musical instrument, you probably learned your scales. That's technique. But when you get together with a band, you don't just play your scales, hopefully. You play to serve the emotion of the song. I like to think of editing the same way. When I first read the script, I was struck by the inspiring message of the piece. The ending really packs an emotional punch. But there was also lots of information to convey. I would say the first 2/3 of the piece, I wanted the audience to have a sense of understanding and a sense of curiosity. And for the last third of the piece, I wanted the audience to feel inspired to take action. Now let's talk story. While this isn't a narrative, there's definitely a story structure to this commercial. I'd say Act 1 is where Matthew states the ordinary. There's federal funding available for school safety, and he states the problem. Schools are having trouble accessing these funds. Then in Act 2, Matthew explains how schools can access the funds. In Act 3, we have an emotional climax that inspires the audience to take action. One of my favorite aspects of this commercial is how director Scott Rice used the different locations to reinforce the story structure. I'd say Act 1 takes place in front of the school and in the hallway, Act 2 takes place in front of the chalkboard, and finally Act 3 takes place at the students' desks. In terms of rhythm, I wanted this spot to have a steady, brisk pace because there's a lot of information to convey in a short amount of time. But we'll talk a little more about rhythm later. Let's discuss the sound. This spot is obviously music-driven, but we do have some sound design elements at the beginning, including some birds chirping and some students talking. And the level of the students talking increases as we enter the hallway.
Safer. That's money to pay for mental health resources and
at the transition from Act 1 to Act 2, we have a couple of sound elements that really help it along. We have this sound effect of a school bell ringing as if class is in session, and then we have a nice music edit that gives us a burst of energy into the next scene.
it is a complex and expensive process. But now, we have a solution.
I wanted to point out this subjective whoosh sound that helps elevate the whip pan transition, and then of course the detailed sound design during the animation sequence.
Initiative. It will, 1, get the word out that this money is there for schools that want and need it. 2, it will help school administrators apply for these grants by letting them know when the deadlines are, what the grants pay for, and how to apply. We're even going to provide professional grant writing services, all at no cost to schools.
Now let's talk action. And the action of shot 1 is when Matthew begins speaking. I mentioned earlier that I wanted this piece to have a brisk pace. So the end point of shot 1 is our first editorial decision that can help define that pace. And you'll notice that I only let one frame go by before Matthew begins speaking. If this were expanded to, say, 6 frames or even 12 frames, that would establish a totally different feel. The cut from shot 1 to shot 2 is known as a J cut, where the audio comes in before the visual. I felt that this helped tie these two shots and locations together as they're both part of Act 1.
To make American schools safer. That's money to pay for mental health resources and security.
The action I cut out on in shot 1 is Matthew turning his head, and the action I cut in on in shot 2 was Matthew beginning to speak. The cut from shot 2 to shot 3 goes from a medium shot to a close-up, sometimes called a cut-in. And here's a quick tip. When you're cutting in, make sure it's motivated. In this case, we wanted to emphasize this line. It's almost like you're saying to the audience, hey, let's get closer, this is important.
Problem is, not enough school districts that need these grants know how to apply for them. And for those that do, it is a complex and expensive process.
The next edit is a good example of how in and out points can help define the rhythm of the piece. You'll notice that as Matthew transitions from the hallway to the classroom, I cut out of the shot before he fully leaves the frame. This adds to the energy of the transition.
It is a complex and expensive process.
After being on the chalkboard for a time, we knew that going back to Matthew would be an opportunity for an impactful moment. So we deliberately came back to him for this line.
To schools. That's right. It's free. When
And then we cut wide for the walk to the desk.
Camilla and I went to Uvalde, the parents and the family members of the children that were killed asked for one thing.
For this next edit, I wanted a smooth transition from Matthew standing to Matthew sitting. So my out point of the first shot is Matthew preparing to sit with his hands on the desk. And then the end point of the next shot is the full sitting motion.
Make their lives matter.
And the last edit of the spot is from Matthew to the art card. And this is an important edit because it's the last image you're leaving of Matthew in the audience's mind. And for me, that was this frame here.
Matters. Learn how your district can get help applying for school safety granting.
Now I want to share my biggest takeaway from working on this project. In addition to editing, I got to be on set as well, so I got to see Matthew in action. And I noticed after he would do a take, when he was listening back on the playback monitor, he was paying particular attention to the cadence and rhythm of his performance. And I had an epiphany. Rhythm and cadence are a huge part of how authentic a performance feels. So as an editor, I want to do my best to preserve that cadence established on set, especially when it's an actor of Matthew's caliber. If you got value out of this video, please subscribe, and you might want to check out my free editing guide, which you can download at the link in the description. If you enjoyed this editing breakdown, you should watch this video next. Happy editing.